So before we continue, let me briefly apologize for the technical interruption in the first part of this afternoon's lecture. Thank you for your patience. Rather than jumping back in abruptly where I ended, I'm on slide 21, I'll take a moment to recap where we are in the discussion so we can reestablish the logical flow of the presentation before moving forward. Over the first part of this presentation, we established that research does not begin with methods or data. It begins with a problem, and not all problems are researchable. We distinguished everyday curiosity from academic inquiry, establishing that research problems must be operationalizable, observable, systematic, and bounded. This foundational distinction is critical because many weak studies fail not due to poor analysis, but because they start with questions that cannot be empirically answered in the first place. When they examine how researchers move from raw ideas to researchable questions, ideas are abundant, but research requires disciplined selection. Using criteria such as novelty, relevance, significance, ethical worth, and feasibility, we saw how promising ideas are evaluated before being refined into questions. We also emphasize the importance of genuine researcher interest. While interest alone is insufficient, sustained inquiry is impossible without it. From there, we focus on the transformation of ideas into precise research questions. These involve identifying clear variables and specifying the nature of inquiry, descriptive, comparative, relational, or causal. We highlighted that a single idea can lead to multiple valid questions depending on theoretical perspectives, methodological intent, and that choosing among these pathways has consequences for design, data, and interpretation. Next, we introduce the hierarchy between general and specific problems. The general problem provides the overarching motivation and scope of the study, while the specific problems break the scope into answerable components. We stress that strong research design depends on alignment. Specific problems must collectively answer the general problem, and nothing essential should be left unexamined. We then explored how abstract concepts are made researchable through conceptualization, using frameworks to break broad ideas into measurable or describable dimensions. These naturally led to the critical role of the literature review, not as background, but as the foundation that legitimizes variables, methods, and the research problem itself. By slide 20, we have also established the importance of logical sequencing. Researchers must describe phenomena before comparing groups, compare before testing relationships, and test relationships before attempting explanation. This sequence protects rigor and prevents premature or meaningless analysis. With that context restored, thankfully, we now resume to where we left off. So let's go and look at slide 21. This is where we ended a while ago. This slide, as I said, serves as a warning. It illustrates what happens when researchers violate the sequencing principles we just reviewed. Even when a topic is important and intuitively appealing, poor sequencing can undermine the entire study before data collection even begins. The example focuses on leadership training and officer effectiveness. A common instinct is to ask immediately how training affects effectiveness. While this sounds sophisticated, it assumes several things have already been established, that training types are clearly defined, that effectiveness can be measured, and that a relationship exists at all. None of these assumptions are guaranteed. When researchers skip descriptive and comparative or evaluative stages, they risk investigating mechanisms for relationships that may not exist, overlooking contextual factors, and producing findings that cannot be interpreted meaningfully. These are not statistical errors, they are design errors rooted in flawed question logic. We need to see the guiding maxim. Describe before you compare or evaluate, evaluate before you relate, relate before you explain. This principle encapsulates decades of methodological experience and protects researchers from overreaching too soon. With this caution in mind, we now move from what not to do toward the constructive focus on how to systematically develop strong specific problems. Developing specific problems. This slide marks a transition from general rules to applied construction. While overarching principles guide all research, specific problems must be tailored to the study's context. To the variables, to the theoretical framework. There is no universal template here, only patterns that must be adopted thoughtfully. Specific problems must reflect where and how research is conducted. Variables that are meaningful in one organizational or cultural setting may be irrelevant or misleading in another. Context determines feasibility, interpretation, and even ethical boundaries. Patterns help researchers structure inquiry without constraining intellectual judgment. They provide scaffolding, not prescriptions. Especially for novice researchers, patterns reduce common errors while still allowing flexibility and originality. So even when using established patterns, theory must guide problem development. Specific problems should emerge from contextual expectations, not mechanical repetition. Without theory, patterns become hollow checklists rather than tools for inquiry. With this mindset in mind, we now examine a typical and widely used pattern for developing specific problems in quantitative research. This slide presents a standard five-question pattern commonly used in social science and military research. Its value lies in logical progression rather than innovation. By building knowledge step by step, it ensures analytical completeness and interpretability. The first two questions focus on the primary independent variable, first describing its overall level, and then examining differences across relevant groups. This creates a detailed understanding of how the variable behaves within the population. The same descriptive and comparative process is then applied to the dependent variable y. This symmetry ensures both variables are equally well understood, before any relationship is tested. Only after both variables are fully examined does the final question test the relationship. At this point, the researcher has sufficient context to interpret results meaningfully rather than superficially. To make this structure complete, then let's apply the pattern to an actual leadership research example. This slide demonstrates how the 5-question pattern operates in a real study examining task orientation and leadership style among Army officers. The focus here is on structure, not subject matter. The first 2 questions describe task orientation and examine how it varies across demographic factors. This establishes essential context and prevents overgeneralized conclusions later in the study. The next 2 questions do the same for leadership style, maintaining balance in both how variables are treated analytically. This spiral structure strengthens coherence. Only after both variables are independently understood does the study test their relationship. At this stage, demographic insights help interpret whether the relationship is consistent or conditional. This example naturally raises the question of how researchers decide which demographic variables to include, a decision addressed next. So, selecting demographic or grouping variables. This slide addresses a common methodological weakness, including demographic variables without justification. Not every variable belongs in every study, and careless inclusion weakens both theory and ethics. Demographic variables should be included only when theory or prior research suggests they matter. Including demographic variables, simply because they are common practice adds noise rather than insight. Variables must also be practically measurable. Researchers need sufficient variation in the sample to make comparisons meaningful. Without that variation, statistical analysis becomes empty. Especially in military research, demographic data can be sensitive. Ethical appropriateness must guide selection, ensuring participant protection and organizational responsibility. Without grouping, grouping variables selected responsibility, or with grouping variables selected responsibly, researchers are ready to consider how studies may deviate from standard patterns. So let's look at certain variations on the basic patterns and even more complex designs. So we acknowledge an important reality here. While the basic 5-question pattern works for many studies, not all research fits neatly into it. As research questions become more complex, researchers must adapt problem structures without abandoning logical rigor. Variation is not a weakness. It is a response to substantive complexity. Some studies examine multiple predictors of a single outcome. In these cases, researchers may need several descriptive and comparative questions before testing relationships. For example, job satisfaction, organizational commitment, and work-life balance might all be described before determining which best predicts retention. Other studies reverse this logic by examining how one predictor relates to multiple outcomes. A leadership variable, for instance, might be tested against morale cohesion, and performance. Each outcome requires its own descriptive grounding before relational analysis can occur. More advanced designs introduce mediating or moderating variables that explain or condition relationships. These require additional specific problems to test pathways systematically. Conversely, some studies are intentionally descriptive, focusing solely on documenting prevalence or patterns without testing relationships. Both approaches are valid when aligned with purpose. So once specific problems are clearly developed, whether using standard or adapted patterns, the researcher is prepared to articulate expectations about what the study will find. This brings us to the identification of research hypothesis. This is not a required part in the DAP guidebook, but it's important in the research process, which basically means if you ask questions, you should know at least what type of answers to expect. So this slide introduces hypotheses as a natural extension of a well-developed research problem. Hypotheses are not guesses, they are theoretically informed expectations based on existing literature and logic. They represent the researcher's best prediction prior to seeing data. Hypotheses serve several purposes. They guide analysis, sharpen interpretation, help researchers recognize when findings confirm or challenge existing theory. Even when hypotheses are not explicitly stated in a paper, just like in the DAP, they shape the research design behind the scenes. Strong hypotheses are testable, falsifiable, and grounded in theory. There must be conceivable evidence that could disprove them. A hypothesis that cannot be wrong is not scientific. It is a belief statement. A common misconception is that hypotheses must always appear as formal statements in a manuscript. In reality, requirements vary by discipline. However, regardless of format, researchers must always have clear expectations guiding their analysis. To see what well-formed hypothesis looks like in practice, let us consider certain examples. So, uh, so let's look. So we've already defined what a hypothesis is. Now let's look at examples. This slide illustrates how abstract expectations are translated into specific testable hypotheses. Each example is grounded in theory and tied directly to earlier research problems. Together, they demonstrate what precision looks like in hypothetical formulation. The first hypothesis predicts high level of task orientation behavior among military officers. This expectation reflects theoretical assumptions about mission focus and organizational culture in military settings. Even descriptive hypotheses must be grounded in logic rather than intuition. Subsequent hypotheses predict differences in task orientation by gender or experience. These predictions are not arbitrary. They draw on theory of socialization and even professional development. Comparative hypotheses sharpen analysis by specifying where differences are expected to appear. The final hypothesis predicts a relationship between task orientation and leadership style. This directly mirrors the relational research question and provides a clear analytical target. The hypothesis specifies what kind of relationship is expected, not merely that one exists. These examples also highlight an important distinction in hypothesis formulation, whether or not the direction of an expected relationship is specified. And here we can see the difference between a directional and a non-directional hypothesis. The difference lies not in rigor, but in the strength of theoretical expectation. Choosing the appropriate style reflects how well developed the literature is on a given relationship. Directional hypotheses specify the expected direction of a relationship or difference. For example, predicting that one group will score higher than another demonstrates strong theoretical grounding. Most mature research areas rely primarily on directional hypotheses. Now, directional hypothesis should be used when prior research or theory clearly indicates what should happen. Using them signals confidence and intellectual commitment. However, they should not be used when evidence is weak or contradictory. Non-directional hypotheses predict that a difference of a relationship exists without specifying direction. These are appropriate when theory suggests association but does not clearly predict how variables will behave. They preserve openness while remaining testable. Regardless of whether hypotheses are directional or not, statistical testing requires an additional conceptual tool, the null hypothesis. What is the purpose of a null hypothesis, which are often misunderstood? Null hypotheses are not what researchers believe to be true. They are formal statements used for statistical testing. They provide the benchmark against which evidence is evaluated. Every research hypothesis has a corresponding null hypothesis that assumes no relationship or difference. Statistical analysis tests whether the data provides sufficient evidence to reject the null. This logic underpins inferential statistics across disciplines. Rejecting the null hypothesis supports but does not prove the research hypothesis. Research rarely produces certainty. It produces evidence that shifts confidence. Understanding this prevents overclaiming and strengthens scholarly credibility. Failing to reject a null hypothesis does not mean the research failed. Non-findings can challenge assumptions, refine theory, and redirect future research. Some of the most important advances begin with unexpected null results. With hypotheses fully articulated, now we can turn to the craft of writing clear, productive research questions and how words shape every stage of the research process. Writing good research questions. This slide marks a transition from structural design to intellectual, even if strong problems and hypotheses, poorly written research questions can undermine an entire study. Research questions are not cosmetic. They are They're not cosmetic. They determine what data are collected, how analysis proceeds, and what conclusions can legitimately be drawn. A research question is the engine of the study. It determines what the researcher needs to know, and by extension, what must be measured or analyzed, even downstream decision, method, instrument, sample, and analysis flows directly from the wording of the question. Good research questions prioritize precision over eloquence. They specify variables, populations, relationships explicitly. Questions that sound insightful but lack specificity is of no use because they are confusing. A productive research question is one that can actually be answered. It yields analyzable data and supports defensible conclusions. Questions that are too broad, vague, or abstract fail not because they are uninteresting, but because they do not generate usable evidence. To understand how much hinges on question quality, we look at the full research cycle that can flow from a research question. This slide virtually captures the cascading effect of research questions. A single flaw at the question stage propagates through every subsequent stage. Conversely, a well-crafted question creates clarity and coherence throughout the research process, from question to method. The research question determines the appropriate method. Descriptive questions call for survey or document analysis, while relational questions may require correlational or regression techniques. When the question is unclear, method selection becomes arbitrary. From method to data. Methods dictate what data are collected. A poorly framed question can lead to irrelevant or insufficient data, no matter how carefully collected. Data quality cannot compensate for conceptual weakness at the question level. From analysis to claim. Analysis and conclusions are constrained by the original question. Researchers can only claim what their question logically permit. Overclaiming often occurs when conclusions drift beyond what the question and the data can support. Given the centrality of the research questions, we need a systematic way to evaluate their quality, and that evaluation tool is what we call the finer framework. Finer framework. Okay? The finer framework for evaluating questions. So, finer, feasible, interesting, novel, ethical, relevant. Now, let's go here. This is the finer framework. The finer framework provides a practical checklist for assessing research questions before committing to a study. It helps researchers avoid investing time and resources into questions that are theoretically appealing but practically or ethically flawed. Feasibility asks whether the question can realistically be answered given available time, resources, access, and interest and expertise. Interest ensures that both the researcher and the intended audience will remain engaged. A feasible but boring question or an exciting but impossible one is equally problematic. Novel and ethical. Novelty requires that the question adds something new, even incrementally, to existing knowledge. Ethical considerations ensure that the research does not cause harm or misuse, especially in sensible contexts such as military or security studies. Ethics extends beyond approval, it concerns consequences. Lastly, relevance. It asks whether the answer will matter. Will it inform theory, policy, practice? Questions that satisfy curiosity but lack broader significance rarely justify sustained research effort or finding. To see how the finer works in practice, let's contrast weak questions from strong questions here. So let's contrast to sharpen judgment. Seeing weak and strong questions side by side makes abstract criteria concrete. Many novice researchers recognize their own early drafts in the weaker examples. The weak question shown, such as is climate change bad, fails on multiple grounds. It is vague, normative, unmeasurable, and lacks defined values, variables, population, and even time frame. In short, no amount of methodological sophistication can rescue such a question. The improved question, on the other hand, specifies phenomenon, context, time frame, and measurable variables. It transforms a value judgment into an empirical inquiry that can be answered using data. And this shift is central to research thinking. The lesson is not about climate change specifically, it is about discipline. Strong questions trade moral certainty for analytical clarity. They allow evidence to speak rather than assuming conclusions in advance. Building on this contrast, let us show how the same principles apply across multiple research domains. So, this demonstrates that good question design principles apply across various topics. Whether studying leadership, health, family dynamics, the same standards of clarity, specificity, and measurability still hold. Each example shows how vague questions, such as what makes good leaders, are transformed into focused, measurable inquiries. The transformation involves specifying variables, population, and outcomes explicitly. Strong questions name instruments, indicators, observable outcomes, and signals that the researchers already thought ahead to data collection analysis, not just conceptual framing. The ability to refine questions is transferable across research areas. Once mastered, it becomes a core scholarly skill that improves proposals, thesis, and publication regardless of topic. With examples in hand, we now turn to the process by which broad topics are gradually refined into strong research questions. So let's look at from topic to research questions. This dispels the myth that good research questions appear fully formed. In reality, question development is iterative too. Refinement is not failure, it is evidence of intellectual growth. Researchers begin with broad interests, topic rather than questions, and at this stage, imprecision is acceptable and expected. The goal is orientation, not final wording. As researchers engage with existing literature, they discover what is already known and where gaps exist. This engagement naturally narrows focus and sharpens inquiry. Frameworks such as PICO or 5W1H help impose structures on emerging questions. They ensure that population, variable, context, and purpose are all specified. To make this process concrete, let's walk through a detailed step-by-step process. And here there are 5 phases. So we need to formalize the refinement process into clear steps. While research is not strictly linear, these steps provide a reliable guide for moving from interest to inquiry. Reviewing literature reveals what has been studied, what remains uncertain, and where contributions are possible. Gaps are not absences, they are opportunities for focused inquiry. Once done, then frameworks help researchers avoid arbitrary narrowing. They ensure that refinement is systematic rather than driven by convenience or intuition alone. The final step emphasizes clear, jargon-free phrasing. A good test is whether another researcher can immediately understand what is being asked and how it might be answered. To illustrate this process end to end, let's present another example, this time of teen mental health. This slide traces the evolution of a vague topic, teen mental health, into a precise research question. It demonstrates how refinement improves feasibility and analytical power. Each stage narrows from general mental health to stress and coping to a specific population and context. This progression reflects disciplined thinking rather than loss of ambition. Applying PICO, which by now you should know, points to population, intervention, comparison, and outcome, clarifies many things. This ensures that nothing essential is left implicit. The final question, therefore, is specific, measurable, ethical, and relevant. It is clearly answerable using established instruments and methods, making it a stronger candidate for actual research. To support refinement across different study types, researchers often rely on formal net frameworks. Let us look at the two of the most widely known frameworks, PICO and the 5W1H. These are the two frameworks that we often use. This slide emphasizes that frameworks are tools for thinking, not rigid formulas. They help researchers ensure PICO is especially useful for intervention or correlational studies. By explicitly naming population, exposure, comparison, and outcome, it forces precision and even measurability. 5W1H ensures contextual completeness by asking who, what, where, when, why, and how. It is particularly useful for social science or even for policy-oriented research. These frameworks are complementary rather than competing. Using both often reveals gaps or ambiguities that would otherwise go unnoticed. With these refined questions in place, the next step is translating them into research objectives. So, linking questions to objectives. So this is a critical conceptual transition again. Up to this point, some questions the researcher wants to know. Which will eventually specify what the researcher will do to answer those questions. Confusing these two weakens proposals and undermines methodological clarity. Nature of objective research questions. Research questions articulate knowledge gaps. They are phrased as questions and operate at a conceptual level. Their role is to determine the intellectual problem space and guide theoretical framing. A study typically has only a few core research questions. Research objectives, on the other hand, translates questions into action. They are phrased as statements beginning with verbs such as measure, analyze, or compare. Objectives specify concrete research activities and directly guide data collection and analysis. A key rule is that one research question usually generates one objective also. Each objective addresses a component of the question, breaking it into manageable steps. Together, the objectives must fully answer the question. To see how this relationship works in practice, the next slide walks through a concrete example. In this case, you'll see one question will have multiple objectives, but even if you have 1:1, that two is okay. No? So this slide demonstrates how a single research question objectives objectives collectively address a question without drifting into unrelated activities. The first objective typically focuses on measuring the independent variable. This establishes how the key predictor is operationalized and ensures that the variable exists in measurable form within the study. Normally, that is the task of problem number 1. The second objective usually addresses dependent variable, and this symmetry ensures that both sides of the relationship are treated with equal rigor and clarity. That's actually the objective for problem number 2. And the third objective brings the variable together analytically. So if you look at this one, in this case, if you have this question, what is the relationship between the smartphone and sleep quality? It should be only, the objective should actually be to analyze the relationship between smartphone and sleep quality. That is the one-to-one relation there. While this structure works conceptually, objectives must also be written precisely. And that's the reason why I said there has to be a one-to-one relationship there. In this case, for 1, the direct objective to that is 4, in fact. Just 4. Because 2 and 3 should be for problem number 1 and 2. If this question on relationship is a problem number 3 question. Okay, so I hope I made that clear. One-to-one correlation. Now let's look at the verbs used for objectives. So verbs are not cosmetic choices. No, the verb used in an objective basically signals the type of research activity being performed and sets expectations for methodology and analysis. Descriptive verbs such as describe, identify, measure are used when establishing baseline information. These verbs align with surveys, document analysis, and even observational methods. Comparative verbs like compare or examine differences indicate group analysis, while relational verbs such as test or analyze signal correlational or even inferential techniques. The verb must match the intended analysis. Vague verbs like understand or appreciate should be avoided because they do not specify observable actions. Similarly, strong verbs like prove misrepresent the nature of research evidence. So choosing the right verbs helps, but verbs alone are not enough. Objectives must also meet specific quality criteria, which brings us to the issue of alignment. And this is what I want to emphasize, the one-to-one alignment. So this slide highlights one of the most common reasons proposals fail: misalignment between research questions and objectives. When objectives do not collectively answer the question, the study loses coherence. The good alignment example shows objectives that directly test whether leadership training improves effectiveness. Each objective contributes necessary evidence toward answering the question. The poor alignment example includes objectives that describe background information without testing the central relationship. While interesting, these objectives do not answer the research question. Reviewers look for tight alignment. Misalignment signals conceptual confusion and raises doubts about whether the researcher understands their own study. With alignment established, we now move to a framework that ensures objectives are not only aligned, but also achievable and well-defined. The SMART framework. This slide introduces the SMART framework as a practical tool for strengthening research objectives. It helps transform good intentions into executable research plans. Objectives must clearly specify what will be done and how success will be measured. Objectives cannot predict collection or analysis effectively. Achievability requires honesty, requires honesty about constraints such as time, access, and resources. Relevance ensures that each objective meaningfully contributes to answering the research question. Time-bound objectives support planning and accountability. They allow researchers to sequence activities and demonstrate feasibility to advisors and reviewers. To appreciate the value of SMART criteria, the next is to contrast vague objectives with well-constructed SMART ones. SMART. So the slide explains each SMART component using concrete examples. It shows how minor wording changes dramatically improves objective quality. Examples demonstrates say to specify inflation, variable, or methods. Smart revisions add clarity and precision. Smart objectives explicitly state indicators, instruments, or benchmark, which ensures that completion can be verified objectively. Examples also show how unrealistic objectives are scaled down to feasible levels. Scope control is essential for timely completion. So once researchers understand the SMART criteria conceptually, they must practice applying them. And here you see clear and vague comparisons of SMART applications. No? So here you see contrast to reinforce learning. Seeking weak objectives written as part of this clarifies something to pay attention to. So each week objective is analyzed to show exactly which SMART elements are missing. SMART revisions add population, method, location, and even time frame in the process. These details transform abstract goals into actionable plans. The example also distinguish research objectives from advocacy goals. Research objectives specify investigation, not social change. So, how do we convert weak to SMART objectives? Technically, it's going to be like this. This is a repeatable process for strengthening objectives rather than rewriting randomly. Researchers follow a structured checklist. The first step focuses on identifying missing elements and specifying how variables will be measured. This anchors objectives in observable actions. Objectives are then evaluated for realism and relevance. Overly ambitious objectives are revised to fit constraints without losing purpose. Adding a time frame completes the SMART transformation, because then the final objective is precise, feasible, and aligned. Before moving on, researchers must test their objectives rigorously, and therefore we provide a test list of to check your objectives. This slide emphasizes that writing objectives is not the final step. Testing them is. Objectives should be stress tested before research actually begins. That tells you it is doable, no? That tells you that it can be doable. Okay? Next, common pitfalls in question and objective development. So this marks a reflective turn again in the presentation. Even well-trained researchers regularly make mistakes in developing questions and objectives. Recognizing common pitfalls early prevents wasted effort and even strengthens research design before problems become embedded. So, sorry. So importantly, these pitfalls are not limited to beginners. Experienced researchers also stumble, especially when working outside their usual domains or under time pressure. Awareness, not expertise alone, is the best defense. Most pitfalls discussed are not technical or statistical. They are conceptual and structural mistakes. These are often harder to detect and even more damaging. And therefore something we have to pay attention to. The goal here is prevention rather than correction. It is far easier to revise a research question early than to redesign a study after data collection has begun. The first and most common of these pitfall is asking questions that are simply too broad. And let's look at this. The too broad problem. Questions that appear reasonable on the surface but impossible to answer rigorously are interesting. Questions like what influences soldier well-being sound important, yet they conceal dozens of variables and contexts. Overly broad questions cannot be adequately addressed in a single study. They force superficial analysis and make method selection nearly impossible. No single design can meaningfully capture everything that is implied. From a reviewer's perspective, overly broad questions signal a lack of conceptual control. They suggest that the researcher has not yet narrowed their focus enough to produce usable knowledge. The solution is not abandonment, but systematic narrowing. Using frameworks such as PICO or 5W1H allows researchers to preserve significance while gaining precision. Even when questions are appropriately narrow, another problem often emerges: misalignment between questions and objectives. Misalignment occurs when research questions do not collectively answer the research question. This is one of the most common and most serious design flaws in proposals. We see here objectives that describe background information but never test the relationship posed in the question. While informative, these objectives fail to address the central inquiry. Misalignment often occurs when researchers confuse contextual description with analysis. Background information feels productive, but it does not substitute for answering the research question. A misaligned study may collect large amount of data, yet still fail to answer its own question. At that point, no amount of analysis can fix the underlying problem. Another subtle but serious pitfall involves bias, not in data collection, but in the wording of questions themselves. Biased or leading questions assume their own answers. They embed value judgments or expected outcomes directly into the wording of the question. Questions like, why are newer methods superior, presuppose superiority before evidence is gathered. This undermines the credibility of the research from the outset. Biased questions constrain interpretation and discourage alternative explanations. They turn research into confirmation rather than inquiry. The solution is neutral phrasing. By adding how outcomes differ rather than assuming improvement or harm, researchers preserve openness to possible things. Beyond bias, another frequent mistake is trying to answer too many questions at once. Uh, These addresses compound questions, single questions that actually contain many separate inquiries. These questions often arise from enthusiasm rather than poor intent. The example shows a question that implicitly requires dozens of analyses across outcomes and groups. What appears efficient is actually unmanageable. Such questions overwhelm data analysis and interpretation. Even large data sets struggle to support the number of implied comparisons. The solution is actually prioritization. Researchers must choose one outcome or acknowledge multiple distinct research questions rather than compressing everything into one. Beyond these major pitfalls, there are several additional issues the researcher should remain alert to. And here we can talk about other pitfalls, and that includes uh, several less obvious but equally damaging pitfalls. uh, overuse of jargon, this obscure meaning, and even alienates your readers. So if a question requires lengthy explanation to understand, it likely needs simplification. Researchers frequently confuse what and why. Explanation should only come after thorough description. So skipping this sequence weakens conclusions. So ignoring access, time, or ethical constraints can render a question unanswerable in practice, even if it is theoretically strong. Recognizing these pitfalls reinforces an important truth. Research development is not linear, but iterative. So we go back to what we've been saying since the first lecture, the iterative nature of research. This slide challenges the expectation that research questions should be perfect on the first attempt. That expectation is unrealistic and even counterproductive. Revisions reflect increased understanding, not failure. Each round of feedback and refinement strengthens the research design. Questions evolve through literature review, advisor input, pilot testing, and even early data analysis. This evolution is normal. Understanding that revision is expected helps researchers manage frustration and maintain motivation throughout the long projects. To visualize this project process more clearly, let's introduce the research spiral. Your first draft is not your final draft. This reinforces that early drafts are stepping stones, not failures. No experienced researcher expects initial questions to remain unchanged. Advisor and peer feedback, sorry, they are accelerators of quality. Resistance to revision often slows progress. So each revision reflects a deeper understanding of the problem, no? So do not be sad if you need to revise, no? This is the research spiral, by the way. Uh, so what are your key takeaways as we conclude or end this class this um the final slide brings us back to where we started. No? Uh, Strong research begins with well-crafted researchable problems. Finer and smart as anchors. Finer ensures that questions are worth asking. Smart ensures that objectives are doable. Together, they form the backbone of rigorous research design. General problems, specific problems, questions, objectives, and hypotheses must all align. Misalignment at any point weakens the entire study. Research is iterative by nature. Questions evolve as understanding deepens, and this is not a flaw, it is the essence of scholarship. By applying these principles consistently, you are equipped to develop research problems that are intellectually meaningful, methodologically sound, and even practically achievable. The quality of your research begins with the quality of your questions. That's why I encourage you, please invest on them wisely. So as we conclude this lecture, I want to bring us back to a simple but powerful truth. Good research does not begin with statistics, softwares, methods. It begins with thinking well. Across these 60 slides, we have seen that the most consequential decisions in research are made long before data are collected. They are made when you decide what is worth asking, how it can be answered, why it matters. Many people believe research is difficult because of methods. In reality, research becomes difficult when questions are unclear. When problems are vague, everything that follows, design, data, analysis, interpretation, becomes fragile. But when you invest time in crafting researchable problems, clear questions, and align objectives, the rest of the process begins to make sense. Rigor becomes manageable, complex becomes structured. I also want to emphasize this. Struggle is not a sign of failure in research. It is a sign that you are doing it correctly. Every strong study you admire went through confusion, revision, narrowing, rethinking. Questions evolve because you evolve as a researcher. Each refinement reflects deeper understanding, not weakness. So the research spiral we discuss is not a detour, it is the path. For those of you early in your research journey, remember this. You are not expected to have a perfect question today. What is expected is discipline, curiosity, honesty, discipline to apply frameworks like Finer and SMART, curiosity to keep asking better questions, and honesty about feasibility, ethics, and scope. These are the habits that turn ideas into contributions. Finally, I want to encourage you to take ownership of your questions. Research is not about impressing others with complexity. It's about clarifying reality in a way that helps others see more clearly, whether that is policymakers, practitioners, institutions, or communities. When your questions are well crafted, your research gains purpose, direction, and impact. So as you move forward, remember this. Ask questions that are answerable, design studies that are aligned, revise without fear, and trust that thoughtful questions are the foundation of meaningful research. That is how research begins, and that is how it endures. Thank you very much for listening.